On behalf of Friedrich-Naumann Foundation and CARE, we would like to welcome you to our series, Breaking the Silence, Humanitarian Crises That Didn't Make Headlines in 2022. And today we are covering Zambia. For those of you who joined us last year, you might have noticed that we have changed the title. Formerly, it was Suffering in Silence, and now, as you know, Breaking the Silence. But we felt to give those affected by humanitarian crises a better voice, a voice with more power and more activity and dynamic impulse. We felt we had to change it. So Breaking the Silence, it is 10 series, 10 volumes this year, and featuring countries which haven't received the media attention they should have received due to the impact of humanitarian challenges. And you have seen it in our little intro clip. All 10 countries chosen by CARE this year are located in Africa. And obviously, we're going to challenge the mantra, Africa, continent of opportunities. I'm sure your questions, your comments are circling around this fact that 10 out of 62 countries haven't received media attention as they should have, are located in Africa. And today's country is Zambia. Not all of you might have the opportunity to travel to Zambia, a landlocked country in southern Africa with a rich diversity of flora and fauna, but Zambia wouldn't be part of this list if there wouldn't have been humanitarian challenges. And starting with the fact that half of the population gets by on less than $1.9 a day, to infection when it comes to HIV or climate crises. So there's a huge box of Pandora which has to be opened when it comes to facing and analyzing humanitarian crises in Zambia. And to make it a little bit more forthcoming for all of us who haven't, for the ones who haven't been to Zambia, CARE was kind enough to prepare two slides. So we have a little bit a deeper dive into Zambian reality before I'm going to introduce our panelists who are going to give us more deeper information on Zambia. So starting with the population, 18.4 million, we are going to analyze some humanitarian indices. For example, the Human Development Index 2019 lists Zambia rank 146 out of 1689. So this is pretty low. We have to admit this. It goes on when it comes to Gender Inequality Index 2019, rank 137 out of 162. So presumably there is a lot when it comes to gender equality, and I know that CARE's work is a lot of is directed towards women and helping them. So we are certainly going to address this when we're talking to our panelists. We've got a second slide dedicated to challenges Zambia is facing, for example, topics of food shortage, or the fact that 6.1% of children under 5 die of malnutrition. 1.2 million people need humanitarian aid, and 60% of population live below the poverty line. So that was the figure of less than $2 I mentioned before. So this is a little bit the surrounding when it comes to Zambia. We're certainly going to address challenges when it comes to climate, flood, and everything. So this is what we are going to discuss with our experts on board tonight. And I'm very happy to introduce to you, first of all, I'm starting with Chikwe Antoinette Mbeda. Chikwe is current country director for CARE in Zambia. She has a profound professional knowledge when it comes to senior strategic management and leadership positions, NGOs, and but as well private corporate sector within Southern and Eastern Africa. Chikwe is currently pursuing her doctorate in business administration with the University of Zambia, and we figure you are very, very busy with doing this. In addition to your work as CARE's country director. So you will give us an inside view on what is going on in the ground in Zambia. Welcome, Chikwe. Good to have you again with us.
Thank you so much, Britta, and I look forward to the discussion.
Lovely. The second guest is Trevor Ambadi. He has in-depth practical understanding of small and medium-sized enterprises. Trevor is bringing us a combination of finance, of deep knowledge of financial aspects due to his background. And but as well, he is bringing us agricultural background too. So I'm sure you are able to highlight what the challenges when it comes to crop management, to export aspects Zambian people are facing right now. So happy to have you with us, Trevor Ambadi. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Britta. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, lovely. To all of you in the audience, if you would like to participate, you can do so just using the question and answers button. You can give us your comments, your questions, your thoughts. You can use it in German, in English, and French, and Spanish. These are the language I can transfer and give them to our panelists. So I'd say we are ready to move. We've got almost 1 hour, so let's use the time to just get to know what the people in Zambia are facing right now. Chikwe, I read a headline analyzing challenges in Zambia, and it read, Zambia most vulnerable are paying the price for climate crisis after flooding and tropical storms ravage. So this was from a post a year ago in January, February. So what happened there? What was it when it comes to climate crisis? We need to. Thank you.
Yes. So I think looking at the situation last year, we definitely saw a lot of households affected by the flash floods that ravaged the southern province, mostly Muchinga and eastern province, where we saw close to 1.7 million people that were affected. So with those floods, especially in the southern province, we saw a lot of houses that were damaged. We saw bridges that were washed away. You know, we saw people's livelihoods and livestock that was also affected around the time of the floods. So it was actually quite a sorry state because the rains came in quite early and they were heavy. And you know, as flash floods, they are not really continuous rains at times, but it's just like for a short period of time, you have a heavy rain fall, which now would actually destroy the crops. A lot of people around the time, that was January, around that time had just grown their maize around November, December, and most of it was submerged in water. So it was already now a situation where their hard-earned effort to grow their maize was actually now something that really left them with nothing in terms of their livelihoods, but also access to markets and some of the areas that were already closed out because a lot of their cross points were affected by the waters. So that was the situation. And unfortunately, of course, that's the same time around now. And as you are aware, CARE International has always been one of the recognized global humanitarian organizations that have been supporting the humanitarian crisis, pretty much looking at communities that will be affected by droughts, but speaking to what you said for the floods last year. Yes, that was the headline last year. And and it affected a lot of households. And there was a lot of support, of course, that came from different organizations, including CARE, working with the government to just ensure that the immediate response was provided to the affected households. And then we continued with long-term development interventions just to make sure that we are creating more resilient communities that, should they face similar crises, they may be able to withstand that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chikwe. Trevor, why is rain and flood such a dominant topic in Zambia? Is it regular seasonal patterns, or has it always been that bad, or what has changed?
Britta, I think firstly, in terms of the weather, is that we have seen these changes in the weather patterns, and I think they are due to climate change. Mm-hmm. Is that we seem to gravitate between either having flash floods or having a drought. What you would have seen in the last few years, 2015 to 2020, is that the Southern African region was experiencing a degree of drought, which causes the region to have a power deficit, because most of the region depends on hydropower. And in the last 2 years, we've actually had an increased rainfall, and this has created flash floods. You've seen this in Mozambique, you've seen this going through South Africa, Zimbabwe, and it does get to Zambia as well. So I think these are direct effects that are speaking to climate change. Mm. Now, the fundamental issue is what you do see is that every time we have these flash floods, obviously, there's an issue of a humanitarian crisis. But the true reality of it is that as Southern African countries or as Zambia, we face an inherent long-term humanitarian crisis in the absence of per capita income. That 60% of the people live below $1.90 a day. That is the crisis in itself, because then they have got no capacity to be able to deal with external factors. These external shocks that come, whether it is an issue of flash floods, or it's an issue of COVID, or it's an issue of increasing high cost of living. This creates an inherent humanitarian crisis. And you see it, I don't know what the statistics are from CARE in terms of the number of lives that are lost due to the fact that people are living below $1.90 a day because they've got no access to health facility, to sanitation, because of their income levels, to the number of people that are actually lost in terms of a humanitarian crisis that is of an emergency. And you find that the one that is speaking to a higher challenge is obviously the issue around the poverty level, that we're living below $1.90. And that is the humanitarian crisis that is inherent, that must be dealt with basically on a long term.
Yeah. Chikwe, do you have statistics? Just answering Trevor's point, is there a statistic in terms of how many lives have been lost because people are poor, don't have access to health providers, to sanitation, whatever? Are there official statistics available to you?
We do not have those statistics, I must say, at this point, but what we've done is that we've tracked them differently. So it could be issues related to child nutrition, for example, where you're looking at maternal child mortality. So those would be the numbers that we'll be looking at. When you're looking at issues of stunting, then you're seeing what's the improvement. You know, like a couple of years back, we were looking at the stunting rate of 45%. I think we're around 36% now. There's improvements, but I think that's another area. Then, like you were talking about, COVID is another area. It was an economic issue, but also a health issue. People died during that time. But also when also looking at issues of just general health, HIV. So we track them by that, as opposed to, which is an interesting point, Trevor, that is actually brought out. And I'm thinking that it's something that we should be looking at and just looking at with my M&E team to just try to do that correlation.
That will be interesting, and seeing what type of consequences in terms of work-related projects could be deduced from it, certainly. Chikwe, CARE has been working in Zambia since 1992. Obviously, you haven't been with CARE that early on. But I mean, what has changed during the decades of humanitarian work and assistance care is offering the people in Zambia? What has changed?
Well, of course, CARE came into Zambia as a response to the drought crisis that happened in the 90s. And over time, we've actually seen from drought, as Trevor did say, drought and also flash floods. What we've done over the years is try to work with communities in terms of helping them to look at coping mechanisms. How do we make sure that we create resilient communities? In the response to climate change, we're also making sure that we're looking at community-based adaptation practices towards climate change, so that it's just not a matter of us going to communities to support them when they're in a crisis, but how do we help them in terms of the long-term period? So a lot of our work has been more focused on gender responsive, conflict sensitive, and also just looking at community-led interventions where we want the communities themselves to be at the center and not always receiving from the receiving end. So in the last 30 years that we've been in Zambia, we've worked with a lot of communities, but as you know, our focus is on really women and girls, because we do recognize that they face the largest brunt when you look at humanitarian crisis or development. But obviously recognizing that men and young men are part and parcel of their development processes as well. So as CARE International, we've moved from being the ones that just provide, but making sure that communities are part and parcel of recognizing what are the root causes of particular issues and how can they find out their own solutions. But we work out in terms of working together for resource mobilization, working with the government at district level to just make sure that some of the practices now they are moving away. Case in point, we're looking at a lot of places where we've had a lot of deforestation. What CARE is doing with these communities is actually working closely with them to now train them in positive practices where they select drought resistance crops, but also afforestation of trees. But in that way, what we've done is that from just giving them something, we're now looking at market-based approaches where they can actually earn a living in the long term, but also improve their environment. Yeah.
Trevor, Chikwe have been talking about coping mechanism. I figure in your work, you're a senior managing partner at a non-profit social enterprise where you try to promote financial models for small and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, teaching, giving background, economic background is a sort of coping mechanism too, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's obviously when you empower the enterprises around their capacity to manage their finances, their capacity to be able to increase their business acumen, and their capacity to have access to market. This is an empowerment process. However, in terms of the empowerment process is that you want to really be able to move them from one level to the next. What we do have in the country is that 96% of our private sector is SMEs, and these SMEs, and then there's a bigger portion which is informal traders, especially in the agriculture sector. The agriculture sector has got 3.5 million small-scale farmers, whereas the private sector has only got just slightly over 160,000 formally registered businesses. So you can see the disparity there, that there's a lot of business in the country that is informal. And this is where the challenge is, that we need to be able to turn these informal businesses to formal businesses. Firstly, because then we are able to provide them support and increase their capacity to generate revenue. And one of the things is that what you do find is that these businesses are generating per capita income that is below the average, which does not make them possible for them to be able to deal with all the external factors around access to health, access to nutrition, access to housing as well. So these are the basic challenges that we do. Yes, it is empowerment, and I think that we must be able to support them to a greater level than just them given the capacity, which is actually financing their businesses to the level that they can move from one level to another. But they seem to be at the same level for a very, very long time.
Yeah, but you were talking about leveraging, trying to get to a bigger form of commitment, so to make sure that the daily income revenues could be higher than you said they were actually currently achieving. Well, how can you do this? Where is the leverage coming from? Is it funding? Is it the entrepreneurial spirit in Zambian people as of school, that you start in kindergarten to just teach children how to become self-reliant and to be more intuitive and creative in terms of business? Or what is the leverage, the level to bring them to another level?
So the problem, I think, is threefold. Firstly is the issue about inherent perceptions, which is basically how do they understand what a business is. This is absent. And it also comes with our curriculum, where I think our curriculum provides a training that is more inclined towards having to create employees than employers, that they do not understand the principle about having to drive a business agenda. Is the first one. The second one is obviously support, that they have no access to finance. The ones that have the entrepreneurial mindset do not have access to capital to be able to increase their capacity. And the third one is that when they do actually get their capacity to be able to produce specific products, it is a very, very big challenge to get to market because of a number of infrastructure issues that we do have. What usually happens, because they are small-scale farmers, they do not have large quantities enough to be able to take this produce to market. And then there's a third-party person who is going to come as an agent to buy their product at a discounted price. So they're not really making a very high return because they do not have the capacity to take this product. So we have an infrastructure challenge in that we have not created the market for this produce that the small-scale farmers are producing to get to market, which needed to be dealt with to be able to improve their capacity to generate revenue. And then they end up in the same place that they've been for the last 50 years.
Chikwa, when you're working with women and girls, teenagers, how is there a way to instill this thrive to become independent financially in terms of business adventures and opportunities? Are you trying to foster this spirit too in women?
Absolutely. So we are fostering that spirit from the young girls in the community, but also with the women. I'll give you an example of Vinya Kapulo, who is a woman lead farmer in Kalomo district. So when we got into this community, well, they had the basic knowledge, the school level a bit, but we introduced what we call farmer field business schools, which is really just teaching these women farmers together. Of course, it's a group of women farmers, but also men through the agriculture camps, where we teach them basic marketing skills, business, access to market, finding the right value chains in terms of the crops, looking at the quality of the crops. But I do agree with Trevor that I think it's still a challenge to get the volume, to make sure that as they're taking that to market, the would-be market would be able to absorb their supply. But with Kenya, one of the bits is this is basically just from the learning in terms of what Trevor said. So Vinya Kafulo was living in this community, and because in the areas where we are in Kalomo, sometimes the soil fertility has been eroded, and in some places you can't even grow proper maize. So the absence of knowledge and just awareness in terms of good practices, they were almost leaving the community to join the brother in Impongwe, which is like up in the Copper Belt. But the moment they actually joined the FFBS, the Farmer Field Business School training that CARE was providing, they were now able to learn, in terms of the right, soil production, and they've been actually able to grow their own maize, which they've been able to sell. Similarly, there are many stories, of course, we're having like that. But what we've realized that I'm speaking at an impact at a household level. But what we're trying to do, how can we make sure that we have more vineyards and we're more violets who's growing tree seedlings, non-fruit and fruit seedling, the mangoes, drought-resistant kind of fruits, the mahoganies, that now she was able to sell like within a week when they were selling like $100. And what she did, she made sure that with her friends, they went through that same money, they went and bought chickens, which they're railing, and they were selling around $8. So it's a story, but what we're looking at is that how can we make them become much more viable and be able to have this mass production around the community so that they can be able to provide even, the chain stores in the nearby Livingstone, but the issue of quality also comes in. Yeah, so it's education for the girls, but I think there's a lot in terms of knowledge, basic knowledge that these communities just need for them to really help them. And like you're saying, access to market and the right information, access to credit for them to build on volumes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've got a question which is spot on. There's someone asking, why is there such a high and continuous dependence on humanitarian aid? Although Zambia has a lot of mineral resources like copper, where do the revenues go? And is there any hope that national income will be also benefit the poor? Yeah. So should external aid be halted? I mean, this is it's a huge question. And well, Trevor, have a take on that, please.
I think I'll approach the question from two directions. The first one, which is speaking to foreign aid that is coming into the country. Yeah. There are two things that are in play. First, there are geopolitical pressures that are on the country, that because of the minerals that are not just in Zambia, but on the African continent, there are a lot of entities out there that are really very, very interested in ensuring that we remain dependent so that they've got access to these resources. Yeah. Is the first one, really. And that is what you see currently at the moment, is that Zambia is in this debt crisis, and we've been trying to restructure our debt. But now we seem to have a conflict between the West and China as to how this debt should be restructured. This is all speaking to the mineral control that they do have on the country. And you see this in a lot of African countries, that the ones with a lot of valuable mineral resources are in conflict, which conflict is supported by external parties, because they have vested interest about where the minerals are going. And this is fundamentally a key issue. The second one is speaking to governance within the African continent, that we've got leaders that are willing to be able to take their personal interest now rather than ensure what is in the best interest of the country. And this is what we had needed to be able to change, that as a continent, we do have all the resources where we do not need to be able to get aid from outside. But this aid comes in as a factor of the conflicts that are created in the West for them to be able to have access to these minerals that we do have.
Okay. Chigwa, as a representative of CARE, obviously you cannot be against external funding, right? I mean, the funding is coming from CARE International. I mean, this is an external source of income, right?
Exactly. I mean, from your introduction, we have 60% of the population that is living below $1 a day. So there are a lot of communities out there that I need. As you know, in most countries like Zambia, a lot of development is really focused in the peri-urban areas, along the line of rail. And you find that there's not much infrastructure that has actually gone into the rural areas so that they can actually also benefit from the country's gain. So as we're speaking right now, we know that copper, yes, is our main a revenue earner, but it's followed by agriculture. And then you find that within the agricultural space, a lot of our maize is actually grown by the small-scale farmers in rural areas. but they also have to be subsidized because they have to be supported and provided with fertilizer and seed. So you have all these issues where how can we be able to, benefit from our, of course, our copper sales, but also reinvest back. Based on what Trevor has actually raised there, there's a lot of monies that we should be reinvesting in our second export ENA, but I think that there's still issues of course, politics that come into play, and also just reaching the last mile communities.
Yeah. Trevor, talking about business opportunities in Zambia, you raised the point that obviously China is very, very interested in just grabbing and getting mining rights, for example, when it comes to copper and gold. But there's more business opportunities in Zambia, aren't they? For example, energy, tourism, agriculture. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So certainly, I think Zambia offers a very good investment destination, and there are a number of factors that speak to this. Firstly is the fact that we have been a relatively stable political country. In the 55 years that we've been in existence, is that we've had no civil war in this country, and that is a positive. The second one is speaking to the natural resources that we do have, a lot of natural resources. Yes, we have got sunshine throughout the year. So the energy sector and creating alternative energy sources is a very big one. And then we've got arable land as well as a lot of natural water bodies, which creates a very good agriculture environment for us to be able to have, other than the minerals that then come into play. And there's a lot of potential to be able to develop our tourism sector. The key fundamental that you do find, obviously, which is still a challenge in the country, is that this is being invested by a lot of foreign entities. So then the revenue that is being generated in the country, which is the GDP growth, is that the major component of it, 60%, 62% actually, is going out of the country. And we find that it hasn't trickled down to the masses. In terms of us having to be able to bring in FDI, yes, we must be able to create partnerships that also benefit the local entrepreneurs, so which are the small scale farmers. So in essence, we need to find a way to try and finance, give access to the small businesses for them to be able to grow, so that the benefit that is being derived from the growth of the country is equitably distributed within the country, and those ones that are taking it as external resources. And this is fundamentally a very key issue. Between 2004 and 2014, Zambia had reached its best economic growth of around between 7 and 10%, but we still had the poverty levels in the country didn't reduce, as well as employment creation was not achieved. And this is fundamentally because all that growth was externalized. This is why it is so important that we require a combination of a benefit, that there is domestic investment as well as external investment to ensure that this benefit actually goes to the grassroots.
Chikwe, it looks like as if you would like to comment on what Trevor said, or are you okay? Are you okay?
I'm okay. I'm actually definitely
okay. I would like to focus on agriculture, because obviously this is so crucial and for Zambian economy. The lack of agro practice, advanced agro practice, or access to fertilizers or mechanization is creating this vicious circle of dependence and not getting to the next level. Chikwe, what is CARE doing to just help to get to the next level in terms of Zambian agriculture?
So as I earlier alluded to, our entry we're looking at within the agriculture sector is really promoting our farmer field business schools, our partnership with the government. So we're not working outside of the government systems, because most of our farmer field business schools are actually targeting the communities that are around the agriculture camps. So we try to make sure that we leverage the local knowledge, but also within that, we just bring in maybe like modern techniques and practices of how they can actually better manage their crops. everything to do with access to markets. So that is what we're doing. And we work with agricultural extension workers. So it's about information, knowledge within those farmers. But of course, our interest is making sure that even the women are taking the lead on this.
Okay, exciting. We have another question, a technical one. So I tried to sum it up a little bit and divide it in two questions. First of all, Trevor, question: corruption and small and middle-sized enterprises. Is it a topic you have to address? Corruption?
It's definitely an issue among the SMEs. Firstly, is that by virtue of the fact that there's corruption in the country, excludes the capacity of an SME to be able to do business, because they are not able to pay these fees that are being asked in terms of corruption, where people want money upfront to be able to issue out a contract. And this is an issue. But the fundamental issue around SMEs is that when the regulations are so difficult, that it becomes a very high cost for an SME, then they resort to having to look at alternatives of having to achieve this goal. The first issue that you do see is that our foreign direct investors that come in to invest here are given a lot of incentives to be able to bring in their investment. Is that to create an equal playing field, you need to give the SME the same incentives that allow them to be able to do business. Because in essence, to be able to turn an informal business to formal is that there must be an incentive. It cannot just be because government wants to be able to tax the enterprise. And the key disadvantage that we talk about is that when a foreign direct investor is given tax incentives, that where they're not paying any tax for the next 5 years, when an SME is registered, the tax entity is going to be asking them to pay their tax in 30 days, which is a very big disadvantage. And these are the issues then that create a degree of corruption among those SMEs, or they just refuse to formalize their business because then they don't have to be able to do this experience about having to pay the tax immediately. And I think that is an issue that is, but corruption itself is negative both for the SMEs and the corporate world, as well as the country. So it should be an issue that we are dealing with, but I think the country in the last few years has been trying to move away from the corruption. I mean, the corruption index for the country was pretty high in the last 2 years. And I think it is important that we get around to having to resolve this, because it also speaks to the business growth of the country.
Chikwe, how do you ensure that your doings in Zambia are free of corruption? I mean, how do you protect your interests and the interests of those who are financing you and those who should benefit? That is clean. I mean, it's just a technical question. How do you do and ensure this?
Well, sure. As an international organization, of course, or any other organization working in the country, we do have a code of conduct that ensure that our staff sign up to it. And even looking at the partners that we work with, they all sign up to it. And on a regular basis, because I mean, as we're talking at looking at corruption and bribery, those are also issues of fraud within our organization. So we've ensured that there's a lot of, again, fraud awareness within the organization for our staff. And all our contractors and partners and vendors that we work with, including the community, we've made sure that there's regular fraud awareness within those communities. But we've also gone a step further to ensure that we've also introduced feedback mechanisms, community feedback mechanisms, so that we have even the communities can be able to be our watchdogs and really speak to any situation where we see that there could be a corrupt practice or there will be a malpractice in terms of the way our staff or our partners, whether it's even local NGO partners that we're working with. So that is how we've actually made sure that we are protecting the organization against such occurrences. But definitely, I mean, for us, it becomes quite an issue, because for every dollar that we get from the donor, we ensure that it has to be invested down to our community participants, because that's the reason we're here. That's our mandate. So it's very critical that we bring out all the relevant policies, and we're also ensuring that we're in compliance with the national policies. And again, it's about continuous information sharing at the different levels within the organization.
Yeah, but surely it's an extremely sensitive topic, and I understand that you have to address it on a continuous level. You can't just not allow, not to be vigilant and try to sensibilize your communities, including inviting them to denounce malpractice, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Referring to another question coming in, Trevor, the question is to formalize informal businesses. What is your take on this? I mean, you have a consulting practice, and who is coming to you? Who is asking you to help and assist? Who are you consulting?
So basically, in terms of consultancy, is that we deal obviously with a lot of donor partners, USA, the World Bank, UK8, who are working towards having to create programs and platforms for SMEs. But in terms of engagement, obviously, we are engaging with the SME at the grassroots, and these are different in terms of their sectors. We've got both the small scale farmers, we have got the early stage businesses, we've got women entrepreneurships, women enterprises as well, that we are actually working in terms of supporting to be able to bring them to a different level. The interesting thing that we have seen in the number of years that we've been working is that we find that women enterprises are actually paying back loans better than the men enterprises. And this is a positive in terms of the gender equality, that the gender financing lens that we're using to try and have to support women-led businesses. But we engage both sides of the ecosystem, from the supply and the demand. It is a slow process, and we really should be looking at trying to get to a point where we are creating impact. In the essence of having to support 30 businesses or 40 businesses a year is not the approach that is going to deliver the sustainable growth that we are looking for. And we need to be able to scale how these enterprises are supported and financed. And I think those are the strategies that we are working on in being able to support finding a strategy that supports the 3.5 million small scaleholder farmers that are not being financed at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Klaus Auer is asking, and he's saying a small-scale agriculture in Africa has been neglected for obviously decades. When will countries, and this is his question, when will countries like Zambia draw the consequences and foster national agricultural development? This is his question. Trevor, would you like to answer that?
It's a very interesting one. When, we all don't know. We've been trying to do this for 50 years. But there's a bit of a discourse in the way the countries are run. Firstly, is that we elect political leaders and then ask them to drive an economic agenda. It doesn't usually work. Is that the political leaders come into office and they have got political interest as their number one position while they're in office. That is what is going to happen to me in the next election is the agenda that the political leader has. And the economic issues around having to develop a country is that economic growth is a slow, consistent process. And it takes more than one term of a political leader to achieve this goal. And this is the basic gap that we do have. And in essence, I have been saying, firstly, as an African continent or as a country, we needed to have a strategic plan, a master plan as to where we want the country to be in 50 years and what we need to do on an annual basis to be able to get there from an economic growth. The political leaders come in and they must implement that strategy to ensure that we have achieved our annual goal to get to where the country should be in 50 years. And those targets are really very easy, are the ones that we're talking about in terms of maternity health, in terms of housing, in terms of infrastructure, road infrastructure, in terms of access to market, is that you can set your goals as to how many hospitals you need depending on what your population is going to be in 50 years, and the political leaders need to be able to achieve this on an annual basis. We do not have this strategy, and we seem to have this cyclical challenge where we seem to be, every political party that comes into office starts all over.
Yeah.
So, Britta, I've just seen a comment about the voice.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. So for Care International, over the years, what we've done is that we're ensuring that we're working towards shifting the power. So what we're now looking at is locally led programming, where we're ensuring that we now work with communities. These would be women-led organizations. These would be youth-led organizations, where we engage them right from the start. So as Care International, we have what we call social analysis.
A different approach to where they want to take the African continent is going to get.
Yes, so we have what we call the social analysis. Yes, social analysis for action, where communities actually identify what are the root causes, what are the issues, what are the problems at a community level, which is led by themselves, the community leaders and the community members. But we've also, where we're looking at the issue of accountability and making sure that there is a proper service delivery. I did speak about the feedback mechanisms, but we also have what we do, like most organizations, the community scorecard, because we want to make sure that at the point where the communities are speaking out the issues, and once the services are delivered, there's an opportunity for communities to actually score in terms of the performance either of the government in service delivery, maybe health or education or other services that are actually being brought out. But what we've done is that now would like communities to lead their own development and their voices to be heard. As an organization like CARE, we only become a catalyst, or we work together to sort of identify the resources that would be able to support them. So that is our biggest, is that shift in power.
Lovely. Trevor, your stream paused and was frozen. So Chikwe hopped in and just answered the question that was left. Would you like to add up on the points you had been talking about, Trevor?
Sorry, I think I was outlining the fact that Zambia, as well as the African continent, need to have a strategy as to where they want to take the country, so that we can create a specific goal that we need to achieve. And this should be a long-term, it should be a 50 years strategy, and what we need to do on an annual basis, depending on where our population growth is. I mean, if you look at the population growth for Zambia, it's pretty high in terms of growth. It's around 2.8%. And technically speaking, is that the country's population is going to double every 25 years. And in that essence, you need to be able to have figured out what strategy you have around housing, health facilities, road infrastructure, to ensure that you can accommodate that population. But also in having to do this, you also need to be able to speaking about what economic growth are you going to have to be able to continue to meet the per capita income that allows the country to move from a low-income country to middle income in terms of the capital earning of the people. Otherwise, as a country now, we are poorer now than we were 20 years ago, because our growth as a country has not been sustainable in economic levels if you measure it with the population. And I think that is fundamental in terms of approach.
Thank you, Trevor. There's another question regarding Western China. What would you, Trevor, wish from Zambian government and from civil society in the West to learn when it comes to West and China conflict?
So in terms of us as a country, as Zambia, I think the first fundamental thing is that we should not be aligned to either the West or the East. We're a sovereign country and must take the best interest of the people to drive an agenda that is sustainable in terms of growth. Whether the West or the East comes to us in terms of financing is that we should be able to negotiate what is in the best interest of the country in terms of financing to support the sustainable growth that we do want. Otherwise, where we are now is that we are starting to fight battles that are not ours and that are outside our financial capacity because we are carrying somebody else's interest. And that's why we have got this issue. So I really think as a country, we need to have a degree of sovereignty to be able to determine what is in the best interest of the country and who provides us the best support for sustainable growth.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trevor. We are approaching the end of our discussion already. Time, as always, is just flying and passing quite quickly. Chikwe, I would like to come back to when we started and when we said there is torrential rains, floods and everything. And 1 year ago, you said these floods are worse than anything we have seen in Zambia in the last few years. So very probably you are going to repeat this the next year and on and on and on. So what is on CARE's agenda when it comes to alleviating the most basic humanitarian relief offerings? What is in the package? What are you preparing for the people who are affected by floods and displacement and humanitarian aid?
Yes, so we're currently in the midst of actually supporting households that have been affected by the floods in the southern province in 3 districts. And one of those districts is one of the most hit districts. So our core as CARE International is to ensure that we're one of the first respondents, of course, recognizing that the government is the ultimate, of course, primary respondent. But we do recognize that I think as an additional resource, we need to go to communities at the time a situation, a humanitarian crisis has actually happened. This year, we have close to, I think it's around 200,000 people just in the last 6 weeks that have been affected by flooding. And what CARE has been doing right now, we've been supporting them with non-food items. So the non-food items would really include kitchen utensils like pots, pans, cups, and also some hygiene kits, dignity kits. You know, I'm talking about women, so they are sometimes are quite vulnerable in such situations. And also we give them like solar lamps, blankets, jerry cans for them to actually store clean and safe water. But we also provide food items like mealie meal, beans, carpenter. These are at least the immediate foods that would actually give them at least some carbohydrates and some proteins for them to have. And beyond that, we do recognize that we do not want to see a disruption of the, the market economies within a community. So what we've actually done is that we also give them emergency cash transfer. We've tried to ensure that at least it's equivalent to a basic from an emergency needs basket, so that once you give them that money, they can be able to buy some mealie meal, or those communities who would not have actually given those food items. It's important that we do that or vouchers so that we continue with those economic activities in a given community. But of course, the challenge has been with the far-flung areas that may be affected by their bridges that have been washed away. So I think that is the major bit, but also supporting the ones that would be internally displaced, where we provide tents for them at least to provide the temporal shelter. I think the need is great. And we know that, yes, such things happen. A lot of, I think this time around, I'm told is actually worse than last year, and it's never happened in 50 years, as the DMMU staff would actually had mentioned in one of the meetings. So what we are now trying to do is that, of course, the next step, how do we help them towards recovery? Yeah, so the cash transfers are one of the bits, but we still go back to those communities, because one thing you actually realize is that within a short time, these are flash floods. They've washed away bridges, damaged a lot of infrastructure. And by the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, it will be dry, but with a lot of havoc that would have been caused in these communities. So we try to make sure that now we help them to rebuild their communities through our livelihood interventions to see how they can be able to manage issues of schools, issues of protection and gender-based violence, all the other bits that we package within our interventions, just to make sure that I think our communities are in a place where they can be able to manage when they get themselves in these crises, because it's never an easy thing. Yeah. I did speak to a lady who actually said while they were actually sleeping, they just heard this wind, and it was actually water gushing, and it just brought down their house. We're not looking at the peri-urban time houses that are stronger. We're looking at some of these are mud houses, and something where the grass thatched roof is actually would have dropped in the house. So I mean, these are the different issues. Kids' school books have been, they are now immersed in water. They can't go to school. So it's a whole lot of issues where I look at how do we bring out the humanitarian and development nexus so that in the next coming years, they will be able to be resilient communities that can be able to at least manage immediately they are faced with a crisis. That's our first call as Care International, working with other NGOs.
Okay, so there is something on your list, I figure. Trevor, your agenda for 2023 in terms of consultancy, in terms of your background, not only finance but agriculture, what is it? What is close to your heart? What are the action points you have on your list for this year?
So for 2023, we're really hoping to be able to scale our support to SMEs from the basic training that we've been providing to actually financing them. And we're working on a financing program that accommodates the small-scale farmers in terms of being able to cluster them. There's a strategy that we're calling the 3C, where we cluster the businesses, we consolidate their production, and we also create collaboration for access to market. And this is the agenda that we're really looking at, to be able to bring on board 250,000 small-scale farmers around agricultural value chain, because we believe this is where the true support lies in terms of creating economic growth and poverty reduction for our people.
So this is the bigger picture, and you're cooperating with international partners, I bet?
Yes, so we're cooperating both with a lot of local partners who are incubators and accelerators that work with these businesses, and there's a lot of CSOs, civil society organizations, because they're the ones that are at the grassroots in terms of being in touch with these small farmers, especially in the rural areas. And it is important to have a community input in whatever we're trying to promote for them. But in terms of having to bring the support, we're obviously bringing in the international donor partners to be able to bring us the financing that is going to support this. And we totally believe that it shouldn't be grant financing. It should be concessional funding that speaks to supporting these enterprises to bring them to a level where they can compete for commercial funding. And I think this is what is going to create sustainable growth, rather than continuing on this agenda that we've been trying to do, where most of the funding has come in as grants.
Thank you very much. So sustainable growth is the mantra for both of you, I bet. We just hope that Zambia will not enter the list of the most underreported humanitarian countries crises next year too. So I'm sure you two will make sure that Zambia is not ignored anymore. So obviously we value your input, and I think it was a very in-depth analysis you have given us, and we feel honored that you gave us your time. It's 1 hour later in Zambia, so thank you very much for being with us, and thank you very much to these very, very qualified and in-depth questions our audience has given us. That was really exciting to have these. If you want to join us and follow us, the next edition is already prepared, and please follow the Naumann Foundation newsletter with the next events covering breaking the silence next time. So thank you very much for being with us, Chikwe, Mveda, and Trevor Mbaji. Thank you very much. Please stay safe, and see you soon in the course of our series. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.